Who likely to meet you choosing on the gristle? Hello, everyone.
And with that,
Lauren, sing now, humming the theme song to the show.
Well, it's in Spamalot too. Welcome everyone to This Week in Hospitality Marketing, live show number 186. With me is my indomitable co-host, which will be much more articulate today than I am. My name is Lauren Gray. With me is Mr. Edward St. Ange with Flip2 and Mr. Robert Cole with Rock Cheetah. With that, gentlemen, good morning. We were just hashing over the fact that I was pulling a red eye. Apparently, it wasn't meant to be a red eye, but a red eye from Las Vegas. You know one thing I noticed? So all of the gambling machines in the airport now don't make noise unless you win.
Right.
Which I thought was really smart. I mean, because that's one annoying thing. After if you go to Vegas enough for business or whatever, you're not there to gamble. Even if and you go through and it's like ding, 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 bing, bong, ding, bing, bing. It's like that constant noise. And going to the airport for the first time was like, wow, this is okay. I mean, the machines are still there, obviously, but not that persistent drone of background Las Vegas. So
yeah. Well,
I think
the change didn't happen by accident. Let's just put it that way. They must have done some testing and going, people don't like the noise. It's annoying them. If they're annoyed, they aren't going to go up and play the machine. And they've get that all figured out. So.
Yeah. There's some pretty smart people in Vegas. Yes. I mean, if you want to see just the trends of things and some of the nuances of what's being tried in markets and stuff, that really is that microcosm. Orlando. I mean, Ed, I would say the same about Orlando too.
Yeah.
The attempts and usages of the microcosm are there. You have such an influx of people, such a volume of people to put things in front of. That
we only see. I mean, we don't see that many people in Orlando. I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm sorry. I do speak out of turn sometimes. I mean, there's only a couple of little parks out there.
A bit over 50% of the state of Florida's total tourism traffic, but whatever.
What's that crazy number you're throwing around?
Yeah. Orlando does have more hotel rooms than Vegas. So. Yes.
I was about to tell Mr. Ed that for those of you who know, I was out in Vegas last week. Last show, I was talking about the fact I was going out and speaking Vegas at the HSMA chapter out there, and they gave me 2 hours to talk. And Ed was gracious enough to actually host as sponsor the event itself as well. And so, as with all things, I go over and I always talk about the things that are usable and so forth. And so I had a nice big fat slide about advocates and influencers and so forth, and how to use them with a big Flip2 logo, because I basically pulled the content off his website. These are the things that you should be doing, and this is why. And it's so big slide. So Vegas got a little dose of Flip2.
Nice.
Wait, I've got a question on the Lauren Gray sponsor. So, what is his contract writer really like? I mean, what are all those added things that he has to have?
Well, let's just say I no longer need green M&Ms. I got plenty of green M&Ms now.
What was amazing about it is, the cost was incredibly low from a money perspective, but the expense of fulfilling his rider was insane. Really crazy.
This face is not free.
so there are also blackmail claims included in these too, right?
Yes.
Very onerous terms. Yes. We wouldn't want anything to happen to you or your family.
Just in case something, Orlando's a busy place. 50% of all the business from Florida tourism comes through there. You live there. Things happen. Nobody knows who happened it. No, it's actually, to be honest with you, it was nice that the Vegas people actually had questions. They engaged. Which all the things that I was told wasn't going to happen. We had almost about 80 people in the room, I think. So it was really, all the things that they were concerned about, the attendance. It's in the morning. It starts at 8 o'clock in the morning, for goodness sakes. And the room they put together, Jenny told me that they probably dropped $60,000 if it was retail, because we had our own custom panels behind us with our logos on it. There was an omelet station. There was breakout stations. They went full tilt. They had centerpieces on the tables. I'm like, who the hell's speaking here today?
Very nice. So where was it held? You need to plug the venue.
MGM Grand was our host.
Very nice.
That was there. And then the Sands Hotel is their educational sponsor. We had people from, by the way, Ed, your seat did not go in vain. It was given to a student out of UNLV.
Awesome.
So we had students in the back. We had a few students from there. And they did, and I'm sure you'll get a letter for it, but they wanted to thank you for your donation to allow another seat to go for somebody to come into the from the students and go and attend.
Very
so,
nice.
That's great. That's
yeah. So Ed did a home run all the way around. You know, not only did he get, and then of course, in my ever indulgence of sponsors, every slide had the little logos for all the sponsors on the corners as it goes. So 78 slides had Ed's logo on it.
Well worth the
NASCAR.
cost. Well
Lauren Gray,
the
taking the NASCAR approach.
Oh yeah, I had stickers,
sponsorship. Yeah,
I look like a NASCAR driver when I went up on stage. Yeah. I mean, it's like you got to pay homage to those that pay. You know,
amazing.
But anyway, so Mr. Robert, you made some fantastic list of articles of some, as you always do each week, a well-curated list of such and such.
Well, and sometimes, the top stories are sometimes, controversial, but I thought would go with what CEOs really think about home sharing and just what's going on with there were about 5 articles about Airbnb home sharing related things. So I thought maybe we should talk about that.
Okay.
Not that we haven't before, but there were some interesting articles at the Alice conference in January. Basically, they talked to a bunch of the CEOs about home share, and there's a wide range of interpretation out there of how they're going to be doing it. Nocetta at Hilton is basically saying, he doesn't have anything against it, but he thinks he just thinks it's something different. And it's like, it is kind of different, but actually an interesting stat that I saw today was actually in the recording industry. Spotify is now, or streaming services, I believe, are now responsible for 80% of that industry's profits. And like 12% are CDs and 11% are downloads or something like that. That was something where I think back in maybe 2000, back in the MP3 player era, something like that, kind of pre-streaming, people looked and went, that's different. And you're right, it is different, but all of a sudden it's now 80%. Now, I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen with home sharing, but there is a lot of inventory out there. And with the hotel industry, and another topic we have are some of the financial results from Booking Holdings and TripAdvisor. You start looking at what's happening there, and I've been saying this for a couple of years now. The hospitality industry has to pay attention to this, and I'm fearing they're falling into the standard 4-step process of how they deal with disruption. Step 1 is they ignore it. Step 2, when told they really should pay attention to this, they continue. Their resolve is to continue to ignore it. Step 3 is they panic, and then step 4 is they complain about it, right? And so we seem to be maybe getting into that. I don't know. Keith Barr at IHG, he looked at it. He goes, I don't know how they do it you can do it at scale. I don't know. Airbnb has 1.8 million properties or something like that, or rooms. That's a lot of inventory. That's getting scaly.
Yeah,
sort of thing.
And they're going to get scale.
Yeah, that's pretty big.
Right.
Hyatt has kind of invested in a couple of them, and Hyatt guy, the head of development, said, I think there's a connection between the customer and business use for home sharing. I think it's obviously a long-term plan for that side. If it's a long-term plan, I think you're going to be playing catch-up, folks. I mean, Airbnb has had, I was at the GBTA conference, 3-4 years ago when they announced Airbnb for Business. I mean, that's
wow.
Yeah, that's behind the times. David Kong at Best Western, his feelings hasn't changed. He's saying, hey, it's about safety and security, adherence to regulations. It's like, okay, they're getting over that sort of thing. I mean, they're towing the line. They're seeing that that's very important to guests. And guess what? If it's important to guests, they're addressing it. Right? Because they don't want What do you want? Somebody die? You want one of your guests at an Airbnb dying in a place that didn't have proper, fire suppression or smoke detectors and things like? No, they understand the risks of that. And then a guy at PwC. Now this was an interesting one. He came out and said micro hotels are the industry's answer to home sharing. Automated, tech-driven micro hotels, and you look at it and go, that's the opposite of home sharing sort of thing, because it's all about the connection with the host. How do you have a unique, individualized sort of thing? This is like, we're going to build a bunch of rooms with some tech, and so that's selling rooms. This thing needs to move to selling experiences, which is what Airbnb is all about. Then Red Roof president came out and said short-term rentals is just an extended stay hotel. It was like, oh, have you stayed in one recently? I don't know. And then Choice kind of said they were going to go stick with vacation rentals, and Outrigger kind of said, they're all in on, not all in getting out of hotels, but very, very focused on vacation rental aspect, right? So some interesting perspectives, which made me sad. Sorry, guys, but it did. And what can you say?
Right. Just from a philosophical point of view, why is it that, is this just a public way? Is this their public speaking? Are they saying different conversations, do you think, behind closed doors as to their perspective? Because we all have, different clients and so forth that are dabbling in putting inventory on Airbnb. They're competing with Airbnb in market. They're we work with brands that are working in against Airbnb as well in market. And I don't hear these same kind of conversations or perspectives. I don't see this as, blowing, oh, it's just another long-term stay, or,
I've never heard that one before.
Yeah. It's kind of like, is this what you're saying out front? So your stockholders are going, oh, well, that's a relief. Thank goodness.
Listen,
they don't have an answer.
If they weren't talking about it, we'd be sitting here saying it's ridiculous that none of them are talking about it.
True.
It's part of an overall strategy. Say what you want about the things that they say and do. They are incredibly intelligent and very strategic in the things that they do. This is, more likely to be part of an overall communication strategy than it is to be, something that's in their general, like, day-to-day thought process.
Okay, so I would say that, and I completely agree with you. I think, if they weren't saying something about it, we would be bugging about the fact that they weren't saying something about it. If they were saying candid truth, we would say, wow, that they're giving too much credence to the competitiveness of Airbnb, or they're not. We'd put some scale to it. But what also is happening is that they're simplifying or dumbifying the statements as if everyone's going to take what their word is at. We're looking past the ghost. We're looking past the okay, so you have to say something to say something, but it's BS what you're saying. So we're not going to pay attention to it anyway. So you check the box that says you said something. You check the box that you didn't really give away anything. And you check the box that says we're talking about it behind the scenes, but we're not telling you what that conversation is.
Right.
And to me, it's like, I know there's a no-win situation. All right.
And they don't necessarily have answers for it, because it's a tough business for them to really excel at without kind of undoing some of the stuff they've done with their core brands. And a lot of them have challenges with their core brands of how do you make a Sheraton a relevant, cool, attractive, something where people get excited about staying there, right? And that's a tough. And Marriott has come out and said,
"Well, it's easy. You make it a Westin."
Yeah, change the flag. Well, that's what's been done in the past. Yeah, you just change the sign, and you're done.
Yeah. So, easy enough. A W,
Yeah, which with these brands having a dozen, 15, 17, maybe that is the strategy. You throw a different label on it. So it's concerning, because again, you start looking at just the death of 1,000 cuts being people staying in a true shared host present sort of area, right? That is a minuscule portion of Airbnb's business now, right? Their original airbed, right, is not really a thing. I think it's probably 5 I don't even think it's 10% of their business anymore.
It's not. When you go to AirDNA and you pull it up, it's a minuscule. When you start fractioning down their inventory types,
right,
and you start talking about the shared space stuff, it's in the single digits.
That's not it. Then you start looking at what's going on with hostels, and let me tell you, with my daughter over in Italy, who's now going to, I don't know how many different, every weekend she's going to a different country, different city, which is fantastic. But Hostel World, let me tell you, and a lot of that inventory is also on Booking.com. She's staying in private rooms, which you get breakfast, you get all sorts of stuff, or they have female dorms, they have male dorms, they have ensuite baths, they have all sorts of combinations. And actually, the Hostel World website probably does it better than anybody else. You can filter out by that, so you can go, wait a second, I want something with an ensuite bath sort of thing, which is great. And she's saving a fortune because it's at least half the price of a hotel, and she's now getting kind of trained into that realm. And I've said before on the show, my older daughter, who's 7 years older, she's 28, she's married. She and her husband, they look at Airbnb first, sort of thing. That's her. So my younger daughter is going to Hostel World first. My older daughter is going to Airbnb first. Now, when they have kids and things like that, will they start going more into hotel? Possibly, or are they going to go more the vacation rental side? I don't know. Right? We'll have to see. But again, those are slices that the hotel industry always used to be able to count on, let alone just the boom in vacation rentals and how that's everywhere, right? So it's interesting times for things getting sliced away, and you start looking at the. I didn't pull the specific numbers from STR, but basically the hotel industry is flat. I think in January they were just kind of RevPAR was flat, and that's not good for the industry. So
you say that, but I mean it's inevitable.
Absolutely.
I mean, it doesn't mean it's a something to catch your head on fire. It just means you should be paying attention, and you should start focusing on bottom line growth.
Well, yes, but also it's the whole pace of growth. I mean, if you look at what happened to Booking.com's shares this week, they beat on revenue, they beat street expectations on profitability. Everything was really pretty good when you look at, hey, that's a pretty nice report. And then they came up with their forecast, which was, instead of 13% growth, was like 6 to 8% growth. And oops, they lost 10% of their share value. Now, when you're $100 billion company, that's a lot of money, of thing. Yeah. 10%. They lost $10 billion of value, sort of thing, on that forecast. But again, it's inevitable. But again, for a lot of these publicly traded companies, there's going to be intense pressure to do whatever to continue the growth, right? So it's going to be bumpy. It's like fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy ride for some of these organizations. So, but anyway, the other things on the Airbnb related sort of topics I thought were interesting was there's a New York Times article on the rise and fall of a multi-million-dollar Airbnb scheme. The New York Times came out and exposed these guys who had just hundreds of apartments, which were purpose-built, hotel rooms, right? That were basically being portrayed as, as apartments. They're in condos, they're in co-ops, they're wherever they could wind up getting them. So there are now some pretty big investigations going. Who knew what and what was going on with these? But that's getting shut down, which is good. And that's always the area that the hotel industry has needed to focus on, is how these home sharing things destroy affordable housing, and that don't kill the city by having a bunch of these hotel rooms which don't have people living in them, that are just being filled with tourists and maybe not paying taxes and things like that. Stop all of that.
Pesky little details.
Yeah.
Stop breaking the law. Let's start. Be a good participant in your local community.
Right. Yeah. And I think instead of, oh, poor, you're taking money out of the pockets of hoteliers, which doesn't ring, that doesn't get a lot of people, super excited. But hey, you're screwing up cities and affordable housing, making housing unaffordable. So our employees can't live near where they work. That's a problem, right?
Well, and that's not in every city they're in.
Right. Oh no, that's for sure.
Like that's very prevalent in, the cities that already had an affordable housing problem.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's an amplifier of that problem.
Right.
That's
right.
But Hawaii's fighting in. I mean, that's been a thing in Hawaii for a long time, is that there's no place to live because the people that own the properties are trading them out for Airbnb and stuff. And it's still, I find it ironic, even here in Florida, made news in Naples recently that they're considering changing their ordinances so that instead of a minimum 6-month ability for somebody to rent a space, they're going to go down to maybe as low as once a month. Now, you may think like, that's still keeping the Airbnbs of the world. That's multiplying the diversity of people that can be in a residence to now 6 times as much as what it was before.
Right.
And, once the money flow starts coming into that and there's a profitability to it, that's the constraint of whether that house goes on the market, gets sold or whatever. I mean, there's already a problem with the fact that the infrastructure that of Naples, the policemen, the firemen, the nurses, the attendants, can't live in that market.
Right.
They can't find affordable rent already in that market because of the value proposition of the property value alone. Now you start monetizing that property ownership even more. That's going to drive them farther out.
Oh, well, and some police departments have requirements that you have to live in that city and things like, and that's those things are starting to have to fall away because they can't.
Something smart up and down here in a little bit is that there's a new development on Fort Myers Beach. It's going to be Margaritaville, which I think is a brilliant concept in its own right.
Never heard of it.
No, yeah, something to do with like
world peace through Jimmy Buffett music.
That's right.
Yeah. Hey, when I get old, I'm going to be in Margaritaville in Orlando. Are you kidding me? I'm going to be neighbors with Ed. But the Margaritaville that they're building on Fort Myers Beach.
Ed, hey, don't call your realtor right now. Wait till the end of the show.
So part of the building, this was brought to them by the property developer, not the city demanding this, which they should have. But the lessons are being learned. They're building affordable housing with a percentage of that being committed to the actual staff working at the resort, so they can. Because coming from the Keys from before, there was buses that were constantly being driven down, and they actually had to make an ordinance in Key West that limited 15 people per square foot kind of things, because what they were doing was they were literally putting bunk racks in bedrooms of houses down in Key West, rotating staff out of hotels and retail and all the rest of the stuff in there because they couldn't live. So they would go down for days, and literally, if they weren't sleeping, they weren't in the in the bunk bed kind of thing. I mean, it was like a dorm, So the housing is a very real, tangible problem that a hospitality has to face from the side of actual staffing requirements too. They could be their own worst enemy when it comes to this by allowing it to happen. So,
No, absolutely. Well, and you start gutting out these neighborhoods in the cities, which are interesting and give the city life and, feed all the local restaurants and little shops and things like that. And then all of a sudden, that starts dying off. That's not good. You get kind of the interesting spiral there. But anyway, I thought all these different stories were very interesting because then there was another one out of Japan where, boy, let me tell you, Japan cracked down on Airbnb, right? I mean, they really got strict, and Airbnb lost 80% of its listings last June, right? And that's kind of like, okay, you put some teeth in the law, you enforce it, and wow, right? 80% was gone. They are now back up. They're down to, they've only lost they're I think down 30% on their listings. So basically, they went down to 20% of the original listings. Now they're up to like 70. So they multiplied 2.5%. Whoops. And here's my home sharing consultant, Seth, has decided to come in and
So what did they do to bring the inventory back?
Oh, they came in and there was basically a registration process, right, where you have to register to be a host and that sort of thing, and people are doing it, right, because it makes sense, it's legit, and if you're abiding by the law, people want to stay in those units, right? I mean, it's like good. So it makes it makes it better. So I've got to think, especially with Airbnb, planning on going public, they clean up all this stuff, the paying of the taxes and everything like that. Yeah, that's been a given. That really hasn't been an issue for years. It's just Airbnb hasn't voluntarily gone and done it unless the cities go and say, hey, you have to do it, right? They just go and if they don't have to, if they don't have to pay the taxes, if the city doesn't care, why should they care, right?
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah. So not the most forward-looking business decision, but understandable. They're saying in Airbnb, another article, they're looking at 40%, I think, their inventory being in China and India. So they are going huge into those markets. And finally, AHOA, has challenged Florida's home sharing tax agreement, sort of thing. So the Florida was going a little bit soft for some reason on the home rentals, and AHOA has called them out because they wanted the Florida Department of Revenue, in all of their wisdom, and maybe Ed can speak more to this, decided to make it a voluntary tax collection agreement with Airbnb owners. And it's like, voluntary tax collection.
Yeah, because
I think there's a long history of that working really well.
People love just stepping up and saying, sure, I'll pay.
Yeah. I don't need this money. I'm doing it for the joy of people staying in my product and deteriorating this value. Yeah. It's not perfect for me.
So AHOA properly stepped in and said, wait a second, that's not the way to do it. So anyway, lots of things going on in that realm, and it's an area I think that I don't know, maybe in 2019 the hospitality industry should focus on a little bit. So in maybe 2020 they aren't complaining about it.
Right.
Because then it's too late, right? And people are getting trained. I think the net promoter score off of Airbnbs is way up in the 90s. I mean, it's high. And I believe, I have not seen stats comparing it directly to hotels, but it's going to be some of the stuff we're doing, or I'm doing with JD Power. We will hopefully get there.
Who are they?
Who are JD Power?
JD who?
I'm joking. Yeah. JD who? Is that small firm that you've started doing work with?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So, it's a startup, I think. I think it's a startup.
But we're doing stuff on travel apps, right? I mean, the study's already been done, and it's the data is now getting put together and collated, sort of thing. But it's really interesting when you start looking at this, because it isn't just looking at hotels or airlines or OTA. It's looking at all of them. So you can start going, wait a second, here's the hotel functionality in a Booking.com or Hotels.com. How does that stack up, from a benchmarking basis against the hotel capabilities or the air capabilities versus the others? And I think that's going to get pretty interesting. So I'd like to see that kind of. We didn't do as much on Airbnb and HomeAway, just because there's some complexities with it. I think in the inaugural study, and I wasn't involved at the beginning, but I think they were a little concerned that they didn't understand the differences enough to really get it into a nice regimented study. But I think the next round we do, it's going to be much more focus on that as well. So you can start saying, hey, look at all of these things. And I'd love to see Lyft and Uber and those guys compared to car rentals, and how is all, just what is the voice of customer really saying about, what they like, what works for them, and not just the app functionality, but what are the real experience? Because you can look at these apps and go, which did you like better, which worked better? Well, some of that is how much product do they have, or what are they looking for, and things like that, right? What's the real activity that they're involved in? But anyway, we'll see. And here comes Stuart Butler.
Stuart Butler.
Hey, everybody. You just waiting for me? Is that what it was?
We were. We did an entry theme song for you.
Yeah. Lauren
it's
is
Stuart
developing.
Butler time. It's Stuart Butler time. It's the best of times when it's Stuart Butler time.
We should probably change the name of the show to the Stuart Butler Show. I think at this point.
Well, I mean, the inaugural start of the Stuart Butler time.
and then, we kind of set it up, and 30 minutes in, Stuart shows up with a great grand entrance. That's
fashionably late. Fashionably late. That's all.
Right.
Fashionably late.
Yeah. Pesky clients. They get me every time.
Sorry, damn those clients. They always get in the way of good fun.
I know.
Yeah, that's right.
That's right. So what I miss? What are we talking about?
Nothing.
Robert did everything Airbnb. He exonerated its values, its virtues, its lack of need to pay taxes, its ability to have unlimited inventory at no expense, and the earnest desire that nobody ever buys a house again and just rents out whatever they own already. He's pretty much summed it all up.
Yeah, pretty much. And the hotel, a lot of the big hotel groups are kind of going, it's different, so we aren't worried about it.
I will say, I'd like to say one thing.
I really enjoyed that article. The CEO were all pretty dismissive. They all had slightly different opinions, but it was all pretty much, we're going to focus on what we're doing. As long as the regulations are fair, we don't really care.
Yeah.
I think going back to that, it goes back to quoting what Tim Peters says. If all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Yep. I think that the hotels approach every problem the same way, which is we're going to do what we've always done the same way we've always done it. Let's throw a new brand flavor at it and know that we're going to do this and this and this the same way we've always done it for the past 50 years.
This time I actually agree with him, though. I don't think they should be adjusting to try to compete with Airbnb. I think it's a different product. Just like I think one of the CEOs even said that. It's like, hostels are a different product, campsites are a different product. It's fine. Well, this is not necessarily going to erode our market share if we do a good job of our core business. And I agree with that.
I think it will erode their market share if they just
not in a meaningful way. I mean
the example. You
look at the major cities, right? I think if you look at the big cities where it's already reached saturation. I mean, I'm not seeing. I don't know about your clients, but I'm not seeing a negative impact to my clients in the cities where there are a lot of Airbnbs. The only time it's going to get wonky is if government doesn't step in and bring parity in terms of regulation and prevent
make everyone play on the same level.
Right. As long as it's fair rules of engagement. As long as their regulations are the same, they're paying the same taxes. There shouldn't be a problem. So the hospitality industry is doing themselves a disservice by promoting Airbnb so much, by whining about it and being fearful of it. Just be a good hotelier and you'll be fine. And then use your lobbyists in lobbying the government to make sure that the rules are fair and everyone's going to be happy.
Oh, I thought, and also use your lobbies, which is something the others don't have. I think that's the big one. Too.
Lobbyists and lobbies. Yeah, hotels have a huge advantage over Airbnb, right? Consistency of product. They're professional hospitality companies. They have more amenities. They have economies of scale, the buying power. There's so much advantage being a hotel. So to be fearful, acting in fear of Airbnb, I think is a distraction. That's not necessary.
We can actually segue to one of your other articles, Mr. Robert, which is the why co-working is coming to hotels.
Oh, yes. Yeah. So, so I think there were some interesting articles. One was from the Telegraph, who basically was just, looking at hotels who are really kind of modernizing the office. So I think it's all coming down to these real estate plays of how do you wind up more efficiently using this space, right? And so if you have, what's happened with co-working spaces is they've tried to make them cooler and more communal and not just the kind of the traditional Regus. You just rented a little box where there was a receptionist and it was just kind of in this innocuous building, completely dark. All of a sudden, hey, there's a pool table and a barista and all sorts of interesting. And they're having a wine tasting this evening and things like that. So they're really trying to make them cooler, more interesting, and get a higher return on investment for, per square foot, right? From that investment that they built out. So, so I think with hotels and a lot of these hoteliers, the owners are also, because they're in real estate, they're also very, very big into co-working spaces. So those two areas are going to wind up wind up combining. And I think, I don't know, Stuart, I rarely disagree with Stuart, and I shouldn't say disagree. I think you had good points on the hoteliers sticking to their need and being better hoteliers, but I just look at this as you have a lot of different changes in how between co-working and shared accommodation and things like that, where how does all this stuff start working out, where you start getting more things like virtual hotels, where if you get a strong enough brand around it, you go, you know what, that's a Ritz-Carlton room or something like that. And maybe it's just you've got a private entry, and you go up there's a doorman who's going to greet you and not go, who the hell are you, why are you here? They know you're coming, and you wind up getting whisked up to the building, up to your unit, and you get great services. Well, okay. And then you have an office, and you can start kind of virtualizing a lot of these things that used to have to be in one box.
To add to your conversation about that, in some sense, look at the evolution of what's already happened, and we mentioned this earlier on. The evolution of what Airbnb started as versus what it is now. If you keep removing pain points of transaction, right now there's still some very large pain points with Airbnb for it to be a fluid inventory turning kind of thing. There's penalties, there's mandatory fees, there's things that keep it so that you can still keep Airbnb in a competitive way in a box. If you can beat them during their peak opportunity of discovery for your guests that you might be sharing space with, like suite-driven hotels and so forth, which do compete with Airbnb at some level. When you're saying you have a suite level or a kitchenette or a long-term stay hotel, and then you are being compared to Airbnb inventory that offers the same similarities to those.
Or a vacation rental or whatever, because it's all all.
But if all those pain points get removed away, and you eventually evolve the inventory, like Ed pointed out, in New York, they're chasing down the fact that there's these super host buildings that were purposely designed to literally be hotels but not be identified as such, so they can marginalize out their revenues and so forth. All these things, if they begin to go into the mainstream, they pay their taxes, they handle this, and we already know that people buy inventory simply to run it as Airbnb because it's more profitable than long-term rentals and so forth, which we talked about, the compression of rental space for or affordable rental spaces. You are talking about building a beast that will compete with hotels. Transitional, dynamic inventory in a market based on demand cycles that's been custom designed and tailored. And once you stream out the conversion process of not penalties and not mandatory fees and so forth, you are building a beast that's going to fight against a hotel that has to maintain hundreds of rooms or whatever their inventory size is, their common spaces.
With inconsistent, but it's a beast with inconsistent experience, less security. Ed said this a lot. It's like as soon as you have kids, like the behavior of the majority of folks that go in Airbnb are younger folks, right? Or people for a specific occasion where they need more room or something like that.
Older folks.
That's not the majority of travel. The majority of travel, it's not that.
Yeah, but older folks are starting to use it.
Yeah, I mean, there are people that will use it, but it's never going to replace the consistency of the hotel experience if it's done right. And I think the challenge is that regulation isn't fair right now, and I think people are conflating a lot of different issues into one thing. But it really comes down to if there's fairness in the market, there's going to be a demand for this VRBO type experience, right? And that's not a new thing that Airbnb invented. It's been around for a long time. And a lot of our clients are very used to this because they're condominiumized hotels. They have individual homeowners who have a choice whether to put their property on the rental program at the front desk or to rent it by themselves or a third-party management company. So what we see again and again is the properties that have 400 plus units or 200 plus units that run their units well, offer consistent experience, are great at hospitality. They keep almost all of their units on the rental program and make a good profit. The ones that don't do that, they end up with 30 plus different rental companies in there renting different units. Their online reputation goes downhill. Their margins are eroded. They can't get the same ADR. So it always comes back to being a good hotel. If you're a good hotel, this is not a threat to you.
In its current form, I agree.
Yeah, I just look at the evolution of these guys. Yeah, and they are.
Yeah, are they going to become a hotel chain? Maybe they're looking at that certainly as an option, right? Because there's a finite amount of people that are going to rent out their space. until you get into this situation where people are purposely building buildings for Airbnb, which needs to get stopped. They need to operate those like hotels. So Airbnb is going to have a limited inventory, which is going to stifle their growth. So they've got to look at other avenues. So either they become a hotel chain, which they're looking at buying. I've heard rumblings they might buy part of Wyndham's vacation rental inventory.
Yeah, well, Wyndham's looking for strategic options now because they split into two companies.
Airbnb.
And now the vacation rental group is like, you know what? We split off, and now we aren't going to go take off. We're going to go look to see where we
look at some of the other players coming into market, like Oyo. Okay, Oyo's basically coming in saying basic fundamental one step hop from hostel in some circumstances. You know, we have your attached bathroom compared to the bathroom down the hall mentality. You know, and penetrate into the market where they're addressing the fact that people just need a place to sleep. They have other things to be doing. They're in transition. They're just going through whatever it is.
That's a different audience. That's not the majority of travelers. Right.
It's still absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. But the idea of it is
back to what Tim says, you've either got to be the biggest and the best, or you've got to be super focused and in a niche. And that in Oyo's case, that's what they're doing. They're not going for scale; they're going for a niche.
Right. Well, they're going for scale though.
They're going from but it's finite, right? Because the majority of travelers are not going to stay in that a step above hostel. They're just not. Majority of business travelers are not. None of us are on the majority of our travel.
But Oyo now has like 5 different brands and things like that. They have Oyo. There's a big Oyo townhouse at the old, Lauren, you're familiar with this because you probably used to drive by it in Dallas. The old, what was the Harvey?
Yeah, the Harvey
Hotel. Yeah, is now an Oyo townhouse, right? Amazing visibility. Not much of a sign, which is black, non-serifed letters which say Oyo Townhouse, which nobody knows what that is. There's no logo treatment or anything like that. But yeah, it's interesting, and they're popping them out in Texas pretty aggressively. So I don't know. I just look at if you're a large publicly traded hotel company, I think you've got to look at all these different sorts of groups infringing on your growth because that's the challenge.
Let them infringe on your competitors' growth. Don't worry about it.
Right. Oh no, they need to do. I wouldn't say don't worry about it. I would say have a strategy. I think the big difference with what happened, the big change at Airbnb was Chip Connolly, because he went in there and talking with them, and I think I mentioned this on a show before, he ran an old, I think Peter Drucker, old 1950s, 1960s management consulting trick, right? Which is describe your business in no more than 2 words. What do you do? What makes you different? Just what epitomizes your business? So he started off, and Chesky and those guys basically said home sharing, and he's like, nah, is that really what you're doing? Anybody can do home sharing. That makes you different. And they kind of like, well, what did they change it to? Belong anywhere, right? Because that was the whole hospitality end of it. Their focus is ultimately on. It's not the unit, it's the experience, right? And that's where the hoteliers need to compete. I think yes, they can use the advantages of their lobbies, their structures, their consistency, but they've got to create those experiences instead of just, you're sleeping here. It's a lot of these hotel groups we rent rooms, right? And it's like, that's not the business. It needs to be, we're providing great experiences, right?
I don't know. I think the experience word is thrown around too much to mean too many things to too many people. I disagree.
True.
When I go somewhere, I want to have a great experience. Don't get me wrong, but the experience is the entire vacation or the entire trip, like what I do, things like that. But I don't want the hotel to try to tell me what that is. I want to choose that independently and make sure that the accommodation piece is great. They offer good
how
food,
does the hotel make that better?
Beds, clean, they're friendly staff. Yeah, be convenient. Sure. But I think we're worrying about something we don't need to worry about right now, because the reality is Airbnb today is very different than what it's going to be in 2 years' time. You look at the moves they're making, they're really trying to become an OTA or some kind of distribution channel for a lot of different types of inventory.
Right.
Yeah, they're going to be more like an Expedia in 2 years' time than they are a home sharing site. So
and I would argue the major hotel groups. The major hotel groups are doing that too.
For sure.
Right?
For
There
sure.
are distribution channels.
To Stuart's point, maybe there's a different term that needs to come up with experience, because to your point, Stuart, the experience is the entire adventure to it. But if I'm going to stay in transition while I'm traveling on a roadside hotel, my experience with them isn't about the amazingness of the adventure of being there. It's the efficiency of the staff, the cleanliness of the product, the frictionless environment relationship,
the deliciousness of the breakfast, the convenience, the comfort, the security. That's the experience.
Or is that just? I mean, there's such a broad categorization of that. Maybe there's a better way to define
the things that you do, or how you feel about the things that you do. Like it's, I don't know. I feel like it's overused, like millennial. And a lot of times the same articles are using both those terms too frequently.
What are you trying to say, that our industry just tends to gravitate towards keywords for clickbait purposes?
Headlines, right?
Yeah,
it does. But here's how I look at it, right? I think, you obviously, as an educated person in this industry, you should be aware of what's going on with Airbnb. No question, right? There's potential threat. You don't want to be an ostrich and just stick your head in the sand. But at the same time, is it having a meaningful impact on your business today that requires you and your staff to put a concerted effort into defending? Probably not, because anything you do could backfire. If you try to appeal to a certain subset, you're probably going to potentially alienate the actual core business you have. So rather than spending a day,
let's expand on that. I'm not countering. I actually agree with it.
Okay. So if
I agree with
that. If I
that
said,
too.
all right, I'm going to get my leadership staff together for a day-long retreat, and all we're going to talk about is how do we defend against or compete with Airbnb, right? Would your time be better spent doing that, or figuring out, hey, forget about what's going on in the noise and outside? What are the things we can do today to improve our current guests' experience and find new guests that are going to appreciate the experience? Spend your energy there instead of worrying about what's going on outside the window that you have no control over.
The focus has to be the guest. The focus has to be why was your hotel
built?
But your guest,
not Airbnb's guest.
No. That's it. I completely agree. It has to be your guest.
You're close to the right point, but really the biggest point to make here is stop worrying about what piece of the market's pie Airbnb's getting, and start focusing on how are you going to take more pie.
Right.
Because most hotels that I come across, if you actually look at their overall marketing strategy, it's a maintain my position in the market year over year. So they're benchmarking themselves against how did we grow versus how did the market grow. And there isn't a lot of talk, at least from what I see, and how did we increase the size of our piece? So it's more than just keeping up with the market growth. How did we expand and take demand away from others in the market? Because quite honestly, exactly. So quite honestly, if you look at that, if you're worried about Airbnb, great, because they are going to take some inventory in the market. And they may take a sliver of pie that comes out evenly across the whole market. If that's really your worry, then focus on how can you grow, how much of the market share you capture. And that should be a primary focus. And I agree, focus on your experiences, focus on presenting your hotel as more than a piece of real estate. Actually focus on, what the offering is to your different segments of customers, and, speak to them as humans, not as just I don't even know how to
a clerk. Well, no, just a clerk processing them, right?
Yeah.
You're getting processed. Thank you. Goodbye. Next sort of thing. Yeah.
Hi, so that's Stuart.
Do you want to be? Do you want to be the? Do you want to be the Department of Motor Vehicles? Some of these hotels you go into, you feel like it's almost like the Department of Motor Vehicles, right? There's not anything. You're just getting your, going through a little process to go get your.
Or maybe getting on an airplane that was delayed for an hour and. Getting,
Well, now see. So what did the airlines do? They divvied up the origins and destinations for nonstop markets and then crushed the competition. Right? So nobody else could
develop a monopoly.
They did. Oligopoly, but still, At least in those origin destinations, it's a monopoly, certainly.
Right. But I mean,
I hope that we don't talk about Airbnb for a month on the show. We just take a break from it and say,
I think
okay,
we replace it with
it's a thing that exists.
Oh, I threw in a blockchain
probably.
article for you, Ed.
I don't want wait. Honestly, I don't want to miss the article on the co-working space because that was one of the more intriguing ones I picked up on. Because I've had this conversation in my head about things about optimization of common space and so forth, and the article actually made me think about reasons why that can be counterproductive.
Yes.
That I hadn't thought about before. Because I always thought it's like, my gosh, you have this space. I was very upset to finish the Airbnb thing when hotels started surrendering their common space as a condition of offering inventory. Because I said you're giving away your last chip in the card game, by taking away the uniqueness or giving the uniqueness that you have in comparison to Airbnb and inventory. But now when they're showing things like what Virgin Hotels are doing, and these other things where they're actually charging for space and so forth, because with this economies of remote work and so forth, and working in spaces, and you need to meet with people, there's still a physical need to be face to face with people. The lobbies are tough. I'm sorry, it's tough. Everybody with earbuds and a laptop doesn't mean you can have a meeting. Okay, you can sit in the corner of a Starbucks and do stuff. Okay, but the idea of having to have a business discussion, and then all of a sudden a family of 4 comes in and Junior goes running around screaming around the lobby with his toys is not a conducive market space. Now, granted, the pay space and so forth that they're doing. Is Stuart falling off the chair?
No, sorry. I got distracted. Someone was coming in my office wanting something.
He's having a stroke.
Yeah, he's saying, Stuart!
He pointed me to sleep bar and I'm
clear. Boom. But the article brings up some great points about making these things, and they're putting brownies out and unlimited coffee and so forth, and make people pay and things like this. How is it as a hotel guest that you go there and now you have a cluttered common area where people are giving you the scowly eye because you're walking up close to a private conversation? Little things like that, okay, no matter how big of a common space you have, you're still, if somebody's paying to be there and you're paying to be a guest, I mean, we all have it in condo ownership groups. It's funny. If anybody runs a condo ownership resort or something, you have the condo owners who think that they walk on water, that everything is theirs.
Well, they
then
do
you have
own it.
Yeah, who own it. Okay. Then you have the resort management and people there. Then you have the membership loyalty private club people that are there. Everybody's going to the cabana chairs thinking that it's their cabana chair. And, and everybody's always like, well, I own this place. That's my cabana chair. Well, I'm paying
the exchange guests who, hey, I'm a platinum tier, whatever.
Right. It's chaos. And what you're building is the same scenario. And now common spaces of the hotels. You have the hotel guests going, I'm paying to be here. I'm going to sit here and do my stuff. And the other person's like, I'm paying to have this space to do my own meetings, get away from me. And then you have the hotel management trying to balance between, who's more important.
Yeah. I think you wind up with more flexible, co-working spaces. It'll be interesting to see if they start taking out floors of guest rooms, right? To say, you know what, we're going to have a 220 room property instead of a 240 room property because we can more efficiently allocate this space to either private offices or bullpen areas or whatever, but not necessarily that lobby, right? And
I made the mistakes where I've had hotels that had, suites that had a big, living area space separate from the bedroom area. And I thought I was being smart by selling the bed off, which I could close the door on. Okay. It had a separate entrance from and then rent that out as a short-term meeting space to optimize the fact that it usually sat dormant and quiet until I'd get a very noisy meeting going on from a very expensive guest that's sitting in this really nice king bedroom, off to the side that I closed off. And I'm trying to make both of them happy. And I can't because both of them have the legitimacy of what they're doing,
Right. And that's a complexity for these hoteliers, right? Just from a pure facility programming, perspective, because you wind up going, okay, well, everybody can get access to this. You want people from the local community to be able to come in and have lunch and wander in and meet somebody there, right? Somebody, it's just like, oh, well, we'll meet in the lobby of the whatever because it's a great atmosphere and you can get something to eat or you want that to be able to happen. You want people to come in for lunch meetings in your restaurant. You want people to be co-working there. You want the guests there. And there are conflicts. And how do you separate that? And do you have to give everybody a wristband or everybody who comes in gets interrogated to figure out which channel they have to go down?
Hotels already know how to deal with people coming in who want to access locations. It's called a key card. So, I mean, why do you need?
Well, I mean, even New York. I mean, I felt like a fool because I walked into a restaurant thinking it was a busy restaurant to grab lunch, only to find out it was a private common space for the lunchtime period, and they only open for dinner for public.
Yeah.
I'm going, I walk in and somebody's like, "Can I help you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'd like to have lunch." It's like, "We're not open for lunch." And I'm looking at the whole place is full of people. I'm like, "Well, what?" And it's like, "We're closed space until dinner time. We only serve dinner."
Yeah.
Well, screw me, you know.
Yeah.
I mean,
and that's happening more.
Like anything, right?
Make
sure it's not a distraction from your core business. You know,
Right.
if you have an opportunity to monetize some space, great. But if the decision is ever, should I favor these people or these people? You're a hotel first and foremost. Your guests should always come first. So any decision you're making that adds friction or frustration or detracts from the experience of the guest that is the hotel guest, then it's probably not right for you and your property.
Well, and with a lot of these hoteliers are taking the route of, you know what, we just won't deal with it. We'll go we'll cordon off that space and the restaurant, right? The folks who've leased out the restaurant will go deal with the F&B, and the co-working people who we've leased that space out to will deal with that. And that's going to be interesting. I think you're right, though. The key card, you've got to figure out the people. How do you make sure that people know where to go without friction and they go to their areas and there's enough commonality where that's great, but at the same time they can, they're isolated and it's not interfering with it. And a lot of hotels aren't designed to do that right now.
If your hotel has boardroom style meeting space, I mean, just making people aware that they can book that hourly and last minute. And then if you have video boards for meeting rooms, is literally when that meeting space is available, have it say available and cost per hour, see front desk. I mean, even that would be something that I think could get you at least some more revenue without changing your hard infrastructure. But when you're talking about real co-working space, I mean, you're going to have to you're going to have to talk about a few things. One, hotel Wi-Fi. Because people who are going to go work, they're going to want secure Wi-Fi, not the very insecure Wi-Fi that's in a lot of hotels' guest rooms. So that's challenge number one. Challenge number two is giving them workstations that they can actually work at. And the infrastructure of that. Now, that being said, if you're interested in experimenting with co-working, like you already have a space in your hotel that kind of already has that stuff. It's your business center. Why don't you rethink your business center as an experiment for being usable as co-working space? Right.
Absolutely. And again, a lot of the hotels, depending on where did they put the business center, in a closet off the lobby, or, some little, thing, which makes it really
but
tricky.
Then you look at like, there's hotels here in town, like we have a hotel at the Florida Mall. Their business center looks like an Apple store. It's beautiful.
Oh, that's great.
Think through that space a little bit. It's prime. It's right in the center of the lobby. Like it's in a really good area. That's ideal. Like experiment with sectioning off a couple areas that be semi-private maybe. And then through your Wi-Fi, think about your Wi-Fi as the transaction point. So you want to come in here and co-work? Great. When you go to log into Wi-Fi, there should be options presented beyond just buying the Wi-Fi. Perhaps it's buying the Wi-Fi in a premium spot, like where you can set up and have, semi-private or private meetings. And then offer Wi-Fi memberships. If you want someone to come hang out in your lobby 3 days a week and make money off of them, offer them a Wi-Fi membership that's a monthly use. Because that's how you're going to draw them back without doing real functional changes to your real estate. And then if you start selling, hundreds of Wi-Fi memberships, you have a trackable indicator and you have a business use case for why it may be worth investing in more space for this type of activity. But even that, I'm going to give the biggest caveat. If this makes sense only if you're a hotel that does not come near occupancy most times of the year. Because otherwise, I don't believe that co-working is going to kind of fulfill the other reason you could potentially think about doing it, which is it helps sell rooms overnight stays. Because people who are co-working because they live in that area and work. Right. You know, so when you really look at it as a hotel owner that's looking at, does this make sense for me? Ask yourself that question. Like, am I looking to like try to permanently fill inventory, or is that something I don't want most of the time? Because if that's the answer, like, real co-working space is not something you should consider, you know, because your hotel is in higher occupancy most of the year or big chunks of the year. And then for ones who your hotel isn't near occupancy, I mean, I'll just question, is co-working really what you should be looking at from an investment versus asking yourself
the best way to drive incremental revenue?
Right,
yeah.
Right.
There's other ways to drive incremental revenue from your existing guests without dipping into other stuff.
And the zoning issue of temporary co-working, you know,
for sure,
is
so I think what we just saw there was a masterclass of why Flip2 and Ed is so good at what they do, because he thinks through things all the way, like not just the first couple of steps. Oh, let's try it and see what happens. He goes all the way through the end and anticipates the consequences that you intend and the unintended consequences, and thinks through what that means. You know, you gotta, if you want to get into this, yes, test and evaluate, but do it with a strategy. Don't just say, we're in the co-working business and open up some space.
Yeah.
Think through what it means to do that and what's going to happen and how you're going to react, and make sure your staff are trained to handle the eventual issues that are going to arise from doing that as well.
Yeah.
So have a strategy.
Thanks, Stuart.
It's down to having a strategy.
Yes. Strategy is exactly what that deeper thought of going into the unintended consequences and things like that are, because again,
well, and even inside a strategy, you don't need to necessarily have the whole strategy, but you do at least have to know, how am I going to make sure I don't get out over my skis on this thing and over invest in something that is, you know, could potentially put a permanent drag on the business.
One thing I've got to, everyone is using the term getting over their skis as a bad thing. As being someone who skied a lot, that is the objective. You want to be over your skis. If you aren't over your skis, you're, from a strategic perspective, you are going to run into significant issues.
You hear over your skis and you picture snow skiing.
Yeah.
I hear over your skis and I picture water skiing, where you do not want to get out over your skis. You're actually leaning back.
Because if you get over your skis on water skiing, you nosedive plow.
Yeah.
You're into water.
Yeah. So because I both snow ski and water ski, and I always pictured in my head when someone said over your skis, I always pictured that as a water skiing reference, not a snow skiing reference.
Oh, okay. Thank you. See, you learned something every day.
That's just how I applied it. That doesn't mean that's how it was
every time I have no idea that term, it's water skiing for me, because if you get too forward on your skis and water, you tumble. You flip.
That's been my problem water skiing. I know. Okay.
Always getting out over your skis. You're like, what? This exactly. Snow. Snow is water, just colder.
Exactly. I never really noticed that much of a difference.
If you ever want to picture me water skiing, just go to YouTube and look for anybody that looks like a water plow.
So you're saying Google Loren Gray on YouTube?
Yeah.
I get so far back on my skis, I'm just a water dredge. It's just this wall of water, two little tips of skis.
You're not going fast enough then, Loren.
You got that, and I'm leaning way the hell back.
Yeah. Well,
but anyways, all right. So one thing the Skift article about TripAdvisor, because to me there's some crossovers of like, okay, so Expedia Booking is pulling away from their revenue drops into them. They're going more traditional media. Okay, fine. Is it a starve tactic for?
Well, that's an interesting going away from performance marketing into more, more brand marketing is an interesting approach. I don't know. And
when you can't measure,
I think stop doing things.
Wall Street didn't like that so much. I don't think.
They should.
In the case of booking,
but they're preparing. They're diversifying, right? Because they're so over reliant. Both TripAdvisor is over reliant on these guys, but these guys are over reliant on Google and TripAdvisor. That's where the majority of their revenue is coming from, and they see what's happening. Both TripAdvisor and Google, their two biggest contributors of revenue, are trying to compete with them. They're becoming OTAs. You know, TripAdvisor blatantly is an OTA today with its instant booking, right? So why would I continue to subsidize someone that's building up to be a competitor to me? It doesn't make sense. They had to diversify. And then on the other side, there's also the angle where if we kind of squeeze TripAdvisor, reduce their value, then they become a more attractive purchase proposition. So there's a lot of things going on, I think.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I mean, TripAdvisor, their hotel shopping declined in the fourth quarter, was down 11% year over year, and it was down 5% year over year in the third quarter. So that business is not, it's certainly not
away from their
because they're getting choked. Oh yeah, and they changed their homepage. Yeah, and their homepage now is a freaking disaster because you can't go and find the hotels and filter them out, and it's a mess at this point.
The minute they jumped the shark, they jumped the shark when they entered sponsored positions. When you can pay to be at the top of results, that completely went against what made TripAdvisor great in the first place.
Right.
They
focused
on the user, right? It was the best tool for users to research a property. But when I can have a bad word, shouldn't say that. When you have a bad property and you can pay to jump to the top of the results and it's not clear that person is paying to be there, then you've lost the consumer at that point. That's when they jumped the shark. That's when they got over their skis.
That's right.
And they, their hotel segment revenue was actually down 2%. Versus their expectations of being up 1%, which certainly isn't exciting. But yeah, it's very, very interesting. They are having some significant issues now on the non-hotel segment. Their revenue's up like 38% year over year. But boy, that is a messy space. Yeah, they need to figure out the hotel.
Their cost of acquisition is going up, right? Because Google PPC, which is where again TripAdvisor gets a lot of its business still, is getting more expensive, is getting more competitive, and it's not going to work as well from an ROI standpoint for them. So TripAdvisor, I think, are either going to get bought or they're going to continue to decline.
Yeah, and then they'll get bought. I mean, that's the bottom line. I mean, the one thing TripAdvisor has in its brand equity is it created a new spot in the consumer decision path successfully. And no one's really challenged that spot from a direct competitive standpoint. So always, looking at someone who knows what consultants do best, I mean, any consultant would look at TripAdvisor and they'd say, get back to what you were, get back to your basics. And you can reset, rebuild, and reimagine your business models. I mean, because from a content perspective, they've still got to be one of the largest sources of travel content.
Oh yeah,
in the world, and that has
huge traffic.
Huge value. How you monetize that is. You can reset that at any time when you're not publicly traded. Now, when you're publicly traded, you can't. You never get to reset.
Right, and that's been their problem, I think. Is the Wall Street has just whipsawed these guys, trying to, not focusing on their user and focusing on their investors has really just created a huge problem.
Made them great. And if you look at the redesign, what they did is they prioritized stuff that made them money, not stuff that was convenient for the guests. So they're in bad shape. I don't know there's a silver bullet to get them out of it, other than saying, we're going to take a hit for the next couple of years on the stock market and reset expectations. Or get bought.
That doesn't generally work well. Ask Starwood.
Well.
True. But then you get bought.
Yeah. Can we talk about Booking had some interesting stats though as well?
Are we going back to Booking.com? Come on.
No. I think
let's move down the list. Let's not go up the list.
No. Actually, I just want to bring up a couple things. Sorry about that. I know I do this, and I know it's annoying, but there's a compulsion.
Can we talk about Airbnb again?
Actually, we can because interesting stat: 20% of Booking Holdings revenue was for alternative accommodations, right? So they're doing close to $3 billion a year selling alternative accommodation, which is pretty interesting. They're also doing a couple of other things, which is one, merchant model. is growing at 60%. So I think they're looking at some of the margins. Their margins are starting to get squeezed. They're looking at Expedia going, hey, that merchant stuff, you know what? Let's get into that, because the hoteliers are doing a lot of, prepay and save, direct, where they aren't the merchant. They're now, getting a little taste of that. And I think the very interesting one is now over half of their room nights booked, not their traffic on mobile, but over 50% of their actual bookings are taking place on mobile and direct channel, which is that's, I think,
Stuart doesn't believe it.
Hoteliers
Stuart still believes we're in a desktop enviornment. There's no thresholds of anything.
There's no tipping points.
Stuart's pure desktop. Lauren is complete VR goggles. And somewhere in between is.
I can't wave my hand in the space in front of then I don't book it.
And that is only voice, right?
I believe I predicted the second mobile tipping point of bookings happening around this time.
But you were wrong. You were wrong.
Ago, I was wrong. It happened before that.
Exactly
my
right.
Clients, at least. Yeah.
Like I said, you're my commensurate partner when I go work out now. I listen to all the podcasts. I'm up to speed. I'm there with you, man.
But I think outside,
I'll give you a motivational shout out in the next episode.
Outside of Progressive fuel clients, I don't think the major hotel groups are experiencing.
What are you talking about?
Because their technology is
Hilton
crap.
said over half of their bookings are coming from their mobile app now.
Yeah.
Is it over half of the bookings or traffic? I thought it was traffic.
Yeah.
No.
I've not seen half the bookings.
Maybe. No,
I've seen 20%. Like 2 years ago, they said 20%.
Right. I read an article just recently, and I remember because it stuck in my head. Because of course I looked at it and said, well, okay. I actually think it could be true, because you got to look at what's the highest volume by location brands inside of Hilton. They're Hampton Inn, Hilton Garden Inn, then Homewood Suites by size. These are the biggest of them. What do they have in common? They're really the road warrior. So a road warrior would be using an app.
Probably is using an app. Yeah.
Right. So by volume of reservations, I think over 2,000 properties make up their select service brands.
Well,
yeah.
Overall. Property count is high. Room count.
Remember, economies of scale. Also, the clientele demographically are first inclined to make sure they have a phone than they are to have a laptop or a computer. So there is that fact that just as
we definitely see that trend, that the lower your ADR or the lower socioeconomic level your guests are, the faster they adopt mobile booking.
I think we should be PC here and call it select socioeconomic. Lower has such a negative.
It's a hierarchy. There's a value
has
to
such
it, right?
a negative
it's
connotation.
The same reason why the Asian market has such a mobile adoption is because it's the most expedient way to get them online and in technology.
Elitist fuel travel, only focusing on the top 1%. Yeah. Oh my!
I'm known for many things, and elitist is certainly one of them.
No, but I mean,
that's his Australian background, growing up in a penal colony.
I wouldn't be surprised if La Quinta as a brand had incredibly high mobile stats, and again, it's because of the type of properties, what the properties are set up to be. I think that type of person is even though we wouldn't think of them as a prosumer, I think when it comes to travel, people who are hammering the road on Hampton Inns and La Quintas and things like that, they're prosumers in travel. They're finding the ways to game all the systems, the paths of least resistance. And I will say what you want. I mean, the Hilton Honors app is far superior of an experience to their website.
Yeah, it is. That's true.
I mean,
absolutely.
There's a lot less friction, fewer clicks to get. It's already remembered all of your information. You don't have to re-log in every time you do it. There's a lot of benefits to booking on the app. And we have an app product that for independent hotels, and we're seeing more and more bookings coming through that. It's not 50% yet, clearly, but it's getting to where it's significant. And folks are seeing that benefit.
Listen, I mean, now that you know, Apple breached the $1,000 point for device cost, and you know, Samsung said, "Hold my beer," and now is offering a $2,000 mobile device. You know, I think you're going to see more and more shift to people.
Also, point out what that $2,000 device is. You're literally moving into the space of why even have a laptop. I mean, through a couple of these Skift articles that Robert put together, we're already seeing an overlapping of technologies, OS systems. There's been a persistent question: when is Apple going to combine OS for mobile into the same format for its laptops or its desktops or what have you, where there's a singularity of purpose for operating systems rather than this mobile version versus non-mobile version of it? That's been a perennial discussion for years now, and it's eventually going to collide when you look at things like what Samsung done with this fold-out phone. It turns into a tablet, for gosh sakes. I mean, you know, that progression, tablets were supposed to be the laptop killers. Well, we found out that it wasn't, because primarily the OS systems didn't operate the same.
And well, I don't think that's it. I also think device input still is a challenge on most tablets. I think, but one of the other core Microsoft has done the best job with it. But and Microsoft's OS for their tablets is, you know, on par in most cases with the OS for their laptops.
And that's why the Surface platform has been doing so well, is because it operates well as a tablet and well as a laptop without the conversion. Robert can speak to it more than any of us in that sense, because he runs with the darn stuff.
Yeah, but Microsoft blew it on the phone, right? Because they unified their platform for Windows Phone, which looked pretty promising, but the whole Nokia acquisition, things like this didn't.
Right, they bet their chips on Nokia, which was a mistake.
Which was interesting. But it'll be interesting to see if Apple really does decide to put iOS and Mac OS into the same, because that's going to be very, very expensive
before they do that. Right, which they've always been reluctant to do on their laptop range, because Steve Jobs was vehemently opposed to it. But he's been dead a while now, so I think they can really go away from this stupid adaptive bar thing that drains the batteries. I don't know if you've got one of those, but the guys in our office that have those, where they have the adaptive panel that you can touch and nothing else, the batteries don't last very long at all. It's really crazy. But
I don't have one of those.
Yeah.
But
why has Apple not come out with a touchscreen laptop yet?
The same reason Apple never came out. You couldn't use a mouse with an iPad, right? You would not allow any sort of Bluetooth or anything sort of mouse to work with it, right? And you're just like, come on, guys. But again, they figured if they brought that out, it would go cannibalize their.
But here's some promising things about this. Like with Samsung's fold-out phone, which is impressive in its own right, the clamshell phone's coming back, because if you saw the fold-out phone that Samsung's done, you can't see the seam.
I know, it's so well executed. And now Motorola is rumored to be coming out with a new Razr. It looks like a flip phone, but when you open it up, it's just all screen.
Right.
So now you get the benefits of the flat thing but you get the it just, to me, that's a really cool progression. I mean, I know this is just a temporal shift in it, because eventually those things are going to go away. The phone as we know it, or phone even in that concept, is not going to be around years from now, so to speak. It's going to be some other iteration of an engagement, but the transition process is cool. It's like, okay, so now you're even smaller in your pocket, but big enough when you want it to be. Just cool.
And you can fold it multiple times. It's like a big old-fashioned map.
Remember the movie with Mars that had whoever was it, where they pulled out it looked like a screen, and they could see it and they could roll it back up. It was like a chart almost,
like a scroll.
Yeah, like a scroll. Yeah.
Future technology, the scroll.
Yeah. Hey, and in about, when was it, 2000, I had a Nokia phone, which was kind of interesting. It had the main screen. Now, again, it was just, text, right? There's no color or anything like that. But it was, about the size of maybe
But it was alphanumeric? It wasn't just numeric?
It was alphanumeric. But the screen was about the size of maybe an Apple Watch screen, right? It was a decent sized screen.
I remember
but then you folded it out and you had keyboard on each side, so you could type with your, which actually, it worked really well. Now, you could get on the internet, you could do so, you couldn't see images and things like that. But yeah, I think they're going to start getting into some with this whole foldable capability where you can fold it up and it's conveniently, you know, tossed into a pocket or a purse or something like that.
And let's not throw in the fact that Microsoft has their new VR goggles out and everybody's raving about those. I mean, they're still too bulky for commonality, but they're going in those cool directions.
You're talking about HoloLens?
Yeah, HoloLens, but that's business. That's going. They're going HoloLens to business. Yeah, they're looking for industrial applications on those.
Well, because there are really reasonable industrial applications for it. I mean, they're smart to do that. You bet. From a consumer standpoint, those headsets still look stupid, and that's the biggest problem with trying to create, you know, something you wear in your face or your head as a consumer device. Is they all look stupid.
Right. Yep.
Says the man wearing earphones and a microphone.
And I look stupid. As do all of you.
And we're owning it.
To be fair, we look stupid without the headphones and microphone.
Exactly. Yeah, we're actually wearing them to look less stupid.
Less stupid. I'm the one that knows how to play. I'm the one that doesn't have it. I'm the uncool on this one for it. Yeah. Absolutely.
You're always the uncool one, Lauren.
I've come to live with that. I've relished in my uncoolness, actually.
Hey, that's my role. Don't get into my turf.
I'm in my lane, mister.
That's
right. So speaking of consumer devices, anyone else find it interesting that all of a sudden all the mobile devices are obsessed with having like more than 3 cameras?
Oh, 5 cameras, I heard.
No, Nokia's got 9. On the Nokia 9, it has 9 cameras.
So why do they need 9?
Because it's more than 3.
Because then you can do like the Matrix style slow motion panning shots with it.
3D cool imagery and faux 3D imagery.
But you can do that with 9
cameras.
But you have to have 9.
You can do it with 4. You could do it. I mean,
to do bullet time. Yeah, you need 9 cameras to do bullet time. Okay.
9 crappy cameras versus 1 or 2 good ones. I mean,
well,
they've gone the way of Gillette razors.
It's one louder. More. One louder is always better.
Yeah.
Well, actually, if you think about it, I mean, from a technology point of view, and Stuart, you probably can correct me on this. Rather than trying to make one very good camera, which requires depth in addition, because everyone always complained about when they start putting them on the back that had the bump form and straps to the lens and everything else like this. When you do multiplicities of cameras, each camera can be lesser and thinner, and collectively they can be a quality level similar to one very nice camera graphic.
Yeah,
you know, graphic lenses and glass and so forth. Because that is really the defining difference between the big cameras, the DSLRs, and so forth. Is that you have more optic, you have more ability to gather light. So the multiplicity of cameras affords that in another way. Because cameras now on phones match the quality of most of the DSLRs that are out there, unless you're into higher grade stuff. You know,
so that you can use software to create a higher fidelity image than using the
f-stops is the key element.
It's a finite quality you can get without going, length.
Yeah. So the only other option is to multiply them.
And Apple just had their little, what was it, shot on iPhone challenge, right? And all the winners, these are great photos. I mean, they're really good, really nice. And Apple's also now, because of their two cameras, is doing the filtering out the other, the depth of field, focal length type adjustment, which is interesting. But you start getting into 4 and 5 and 9. The best camera, my understanding, is still the Google Pixel 3. It has 1 camera, but it has the best software, right? So it's taking great pictures because Google's really focused on the software. I've got to think that.
You mean a pun? Yeah, you're focused on software. Yeah, okay. You funny man.
Exactly.
But I mean, if you go look at your photos, go back and look at your photos from the early generations of iPhones. They are so grainy, it's unbelievable. But now we're at a point where it's pretty high resolution on the newer phones that I don't know. You're getting to the point where unless you're a professional photographer, I don't think there's much benefit to an average consumer.
Yeah. And most of the pros are doing it just because they have more control over the imaging, right? And they can use they can replace lenses and do things like that. So it's just more of a flexibility type thing. So I don't know. Maybe with the 9 cameras, they've got one that's the hyper wide angle and another that's a super telephoto. God knows what.
Slow motion, slow aperture. There's a lot of different things you could do.
Yeah.
More is better, always.
Always.
More is better.
I've always gone with that one. So, Mr. Robert, you made the wonderful list. What did we miss?
Well, just for Ed, I mean, there was an article on there's no good reason to trust blockchain technology. So that was just a gratuitous.
I didn't even read that. I just didn't even read the article. Just out of principle.
I just thought that was good. So again, yes, if you only have a hammer, everything looks like every problem looks like a nail, right? So, yeah, so I don't know. There were Google.
I like the ones on the Google one on the
mobile.
The optimizing the site for mobile, and then there was the page speed, how to optimize your page speed as well. I like those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
they were kind of
good
very
tools.
Tactical, nerdy stuff.
Yep, which I know Lauren loved that sort of thing. So again, on this, knowing my audience is you guys, right? Because nobody watches the show, so. So I tried to throw in
some takeaways in the one on page speed. One of the things, because it's tough, right? Because the person in charge of making the decision, hey, we're going to spend money to improve the speed of our website, is not the person that can actually do the work 9 out of 10. Right. There's certain things they can do, right? Like optimizing images, but a lot of it's on the technical side, like G-zipping stuff and compression and CDNs, and it gets nerdy and technical. But I think, because of that, it's hard, right? And people try to avoid things that are hard in general. But there's an interesting stat, which I don't think people pay enough attention to, which is Google wants sites to be loading in less than 3 seconds.
Right.
But the vast majority, and they've said repeatedly that this is a signal for SEO now. So not only is it a better experience for the people who come to your site, but you do get a lot more visibility the faster your site is, right? And we see that there's a direct correlation. So you want higher search engine rankings, make your site faster. So there's definitely a compelling reason to do it. But because it's hard, the majority of people aren't doing it. So the majority of the websites out there, over 90% of the sites out there on the web, are loading slower than 3 seconds, which means you have a huge opportunity with a known benefit that if you do apply the extra effort and your competition isn't, you get that benefit of being an early adopter. So everyone that has a budget that is in control of where that's spent this year, part of your digital budget needs to be spent on making your website faster. And it's going to require effort from multiple team members, but you should have that as a project that you're going to tackle this year.
And maybe we should go through the guidelines just very quickly, because there were a dozen. There were a dozen of them.
Some of them are nerdy and confusing.
One is to use a CDN, which is a content delivery network. So get it on a platform that's built for delivering content efficiently.
Go look at, if you're confused about what that is, go look at. We use Cloudflare a lot for our clients, but basically what it does is any of the assets, the heavy lifting assets that don't change, like your images, things like that, they get loaded from some other place that's on the backbone of the internet. So they just get transferred faster to the end consumer versus having to come from your physical server. So CDNs are great, real easy, cheap, easy to set up, easy to manage.
Oh yeah, a pro Cloudflare account's what, $20 a month or something like that?
Yeah, it's nothing. Yeah, really cheap. And think about it. Not only is it going to help you with visibility, but it's also going to improve your conversion rate on your site. The ROI on just doing that alone is phenomenal. So
and if you have a server problem, I mean, all of a sudden your site can be up because it's out in the cloud.
Yeah, it's cached, right?
It's just looking at that static stuff. Now, again, if your booking engine's down, that's a whole different thing. But if people are just browsing through your site to see what you've got, that's great. You're getting static information. They need your phone number, something like that. That's fantastic.
Right.
Number two, move to a better host. Yes, crappy, cheap hosting providers. No, I shouldn't say. It may be good. There are some good, cheap hosting providers, but crappy hosting and there's some expensive crappy hosting providers too. So you want a good host.
Those $10 a month programs, that means you're on a server with hundreds, if not thousands, of other websites, which will affect the speed of your site, because when they are overloaded, your site is going to slow down. Don't do that. Spend the extra $20, $30, $50, $100 a month to get either a dedicated VPS or some kind of physical server. I suggest going with private cloud, but dude, isolate your traffic from
the virtual private server. The VPSs, I think, are really kind of the way to go generally.
Mm-hmm.
This is the big one, and this is probably the number one issue is optimize the size of images on your website, because now all these hotels have gone to the
it's slow loads, and you did no benefit to yourself because it's not indexed correctly. On and on and on and on. So it has to be your website is a valuable 24/7 asset that has to be handled just like you would any valuable 24/7 asset from your building structure as a hotel all the way through. You just don't give the keys to anybody.
Yeah. And
you need to
JPEGs
train
and things
people.
aren't the best. Yeah, and JPEG isn't the best image format. There are SVG and all these other things that are new modern formats which compress better.
Exactly.
Yep.
I will say this: because we monitor the load time of our client sites, and when we see a spike in load time, I'd say 99% of the time it's because someone uploaded. What happens is they get the photo from the photographer, and it's a gazillion pixels, wide, and they're displaying it on the website at most 1,000 pixels wide, but they didn't take the time to reduce the size, or they didn't have a CMS that allows them to automatically resize, and they just upload this humongous monster of a file, and it breaks everything.
Yeah, the CMS is hugely. Actually, I can do it myself, and here's something I can watch out, right? Because you got.
I learned that lesson firsthand.
Really? What a surprise, Lauren!
Yeah, that one was written for Lauren.
that rule was probably written with me as the poster. If you look that up on Wikipedia, there's my face.
Yeah, that's right. That's too many plugins.
And you get into these things. Number 5 was minimize the number of JavaScript and CSS files. The problem is with all these plugins, you can't do that, right? No. Because they're all isolated. Right. You don't have control of them. God knows what's going on. That's.
And if you're using stuff, make a child site. Don't keep it on the mother, because anytime WordPress, if your own person updates itself, it wipes out any customizations you created or anything you've done to streamline and create efficiencies, because you're basically
child themes for WordPress. That's right. You gotta do that. Use website caching. Yeah, that's obvious. And interestingly, I think some people do get messed up where they're using caching on their CMS. Then they've got things out on Cloudflare and
using could tackle. Yeah. Robert touched on what the actual CMS you're using itself is huge.
Oh, hey, gentlemen, I apologize. I just realized it's 1 o'clock. I do have to go.
And he's dozed, and Ed has no interest.
No, I do find it interesting, but I just had someone walk in saying I'm 3 minutes late for my meeting. So, oops.
Whoops. Mr. Ed, thank you so much. People know about
Thanks, guys.
See you next week, Ed.
Flip.to. Stuart, I'll see you next week.
Tuesday. Yes, sir.
Yep. Going to Myrtle. All right. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thanks, Mr. Ed.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh, so
it's coming for spring break next week, he said.
Nice. Oh, I thought you guys might be
he's coming
be heading to ITB Berlin instead, because that's a big. Well, I don't think you want Stuart and Ed in Berlin. That's not good. That's like call the consulate in advance to warn them.
That's fine. Stuart and Ed are going to be out drinking on Tuesday night in Myrtle Beach, so it could be just as bad.
That should be fun.
So just a few more. Implement gzip compression. Compress your files. Optimize your CMS, because again, you can get 140 versions of your posts and God knows whatever else crap is hanging around there, which is just a bunch of excess stuff your CMS has to deal with. Reduce the use of web fonts. They're very, very popular, but they have some more modern things, and
anytime you have to go out and grab something from somewhere else and then send it to it's not necessary.
Yeah.
Just take away the unnecessary.
A big one. Yeah. A huge one, detecting 404 errors. Boy, when people change things and they don't use a 301 redirect or something like that, these 404 errors, page isn't found, is not a good outcome. That's just not.
Yeah, and I think they were talking about the monitoring of that, like software that detects that and then that slows down. So, yeah.
Mm. Oh, I see. Yeah. Yep.
Hey, sort of quick question: do you do redirects for misspells?
No. No. I think we only do redirects when it was a page that is no longer a page. We would rather 404 it if it's not a legitimate page. I think that's Google's guidelines would suggest that's the right way to do it.
Okay. No, just curious. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, we have registered URLs that are misspellings and redirect those.
Oh,
but
there's
a page like accommodations is one of the most mistyped words in the hospitality industry, right? Double C, double M, and people drop one of those. But like I wouldn't have a /accommodations misspelled redirecting to /accommodations or something like that.
Yeah,
I'd just 404 it and show a sitemap.
I was thinking about from a marketing perspective, if you had an event page or if you had a content page and you don't actually have the page, but you have a page that's related to it. Like I don't have a separate page on Tulip Festival, but I do have it as a part of my 20 things to do when you're in the city that I have the redirect go from, if they look for Tulip Festival online, then it goes to that page.
Yeah, but so if you do a redirect, the original page doesn't get indexed, right? So where you're redirecting from, so there's no benefit to that. So you build the content on the master page, and then Google's going to detect, and Google does a pretty good job these days of figuring out what misspellings are meant to mean, and then it's going to correlate you appropriately. So.
Sure. And even some of the CMSs and websites will do that too, right? Where actually WordPress has gotten pretty good at doing some of those things of finding, here's a page that you must have meant such and such. But the other thing on these redirects is if you, who knows, maybe you changed your website 5 years ago or something like that. If you don't have a bunch of people linking to that old page, and the new page is it, well, get rid of the redirect. There's no reason to.
Don't have it unless it's needed for sure. Monitor what is getting tracked. We tend to also, when we do that, when we do take away an old redirect, we'll monitor the 404 of that URL to see if there's still traffic coming to it, and we have put them back in some cases. Google Search Console shows you a list of the 404s that are getting hit, so you can use that as a good indicator if you missed any redirects.
And then the last one was to use like prefetching techniques, which is great. But boy, if you have 200 links on your homepage, please do not do that.
Don't go preload every page on the site. That's not. But if you know that most people that come to your site are going to do a certain action, go to the accommodations or the amenities page. It's okay to preload some of the heavy stuff that's going to be on that page after the rest of the content's loaded. Right. But think about it. Think about through that, right? Because that means the stuff, it still registers as loading that first page. So even though it slows down the second and third pages, that first page is still loading and takes a while. So I don't know. That one's the kind of weakest on mine. I like things like lazy loading, which is the opposite. So don't load all the content until people start scrolling down. So I don't know if you've ever seen the website where the top loads, and then as people start going down the page, images pop in, right? They show up as you roll. That's lazy loading, and that's an opportunity to at least speed up the initial download of the page. So we do that.
And if you have one of these kind of virtual scrolling pages where you've got a lot of images and things like that, which may be full with things.
Well,
lazy loading's a good option for that.
But you can't do that with Parallax though, because Parallax has to preload behind, right?
But it depends what. I mean, you can do it with different parts. You can tell which images, right? So what you want to do is, if it's a background, like you're doing some parallax weirdness to look cool, you preload those, right? Because otherwise they're going to miss it as they're scrolling down. But then maybe you've got you load 3 blog articles, and then as they scroll down, you pull in the next 3, and then the next 3, or something like that. So it's got to be contextual, and it's got to make sense and not inconvenience the guest or the consumer in this case. And but page speed is very, very important. It should be an initiative for everyone this year that hasn't paid attention.
Stuart, I quoted you in Las Vegas as it may seem apparent. You're probably the biggest advocate of any of these things, not just speed loads of pages and so forth, but the opportunities of if we're being asked to do things and most people aren't doing these things, that amplifies the opportunity, not just for the benefit of what's being prescribed, but the amplification the competitors aren't. Because I was talking about CRM and doing workflows and A/B testings and dynamic data insertions and so forth. And as I'm talking to the group, it's like, this may sound all common sense and it makes perfect sense to be doing it and so forth. I says, I've never come to a client ever that was already doing it. They have maybe pieces here and there, or startings of it or something, but never have I ever walked into a client going, wow, you guys are impressively knocking it out of the park with your CRM workflows and your dynamic ad insertion.
Because it's hard, right? It takes time and it takes energy, and people tend to resist that. The inclination of most people are, man, I know that's probably good for me, but man, that's a lot of work. I really
because that means when you're sending out an email, you're actually having to make 3 emails just on a basic workflow. You have the email you're sending, the resend trigger one, and the one if it was triggered but not completed in action, the follow-up one of the supplemental offer. You know, and then you're doing segmentation as to the data you're sending. You're not just hitting the big red button all the time saying send it to everybody, send it. You're breaking out what you're sending, and it's a lot of work to do. And then you add on to that an A/B test, which is take 10%, drop it here, 10% drop it there. Which one wins gets the extra 80. You know, even adding that into the conversation is like, oh Jesus, now every email's these, holy shit, you know.
And it winds up, you know, it's the MVP problem, which is not most valuable player. It is minimum viable product, right?
Right.
That's it. You go, is this good enough?
I checked off this box. Let's move on to the next.
I call it the least cost denominator, which is all agencies tend to do this. No, Stuart, not saying you guys, but just most agencies, they standardize the service profile and then hand down the least cost denominator. How much can I give it to the person I'm paying the less to do the most heavy lifting for because it costs me the least to get it done?
Right. Yeah, that's the problem with the agency model. That's why Fuel has deliberately turned down business and not scaled to the size of some of these other guys, is because in order to scale, you have to sacrifice on certain quality by finding efficiencies like that. And that's just, I don't think you deliver the quality of product when you do that. But I think any time in life in general, a mentor of mine a long time ago taught me this, that anytime it seems like it's going to be difficult, but you see the value, know that everyone else is going to see it as difficult as well. I'm probably not going to do it. So as long as you're less lazy than your competition, you're going to be successful. So when your natural inclination is, man, that's going to be hard, do it. It's more reason to do it because everyone else is not. So page speed is a prime example of that.
That is good advice. Be less lazy than your competition.
Actually, okay. To go Wayne's philosophical was heavy into martial arts. One of my instructors says every gravel road started as a boulder. If you add time to any equation, you can break it down to the smallest pieces, and it doesn't get in your way. And
it's true. That's true. Yeah,
it's like, oh, thank you. And and my nickname was Grasshopper, and I walked around, I grabbed the pebble out of his hand. It was really cool stuff.
I think you should extend that down to, but then you got to extend it down to a beach scenario. Ultimately,
grains of sand, and how much can you hold in your hand? And
So are we ready? Are we ready for a rut row?
Let's do the rut row.
I love this rut row. It makes my fellow countrymen made me proud.
Wait, the guy's from New Zealand? I had no idea.
Funny.
We need to have Stuart. Yeah, every show we need to make sure that we say that Stuart is from New Zealand, Australia, South Africa.
We're going to Fiji next, by the way. We're just going to pop into Fiji.
Yeah. Dutch. He's Dutch, I think.
He's Dutch now.
I don't know where that accent comes from. Yeah.
I was called Swedish once, which was the
Swedish
one. Yeah, but it was because during the World Cup, I'm obnoxious and I fly my George. So people get confused about the English flag versus the Union flag, the United Kingdom flag. So the one you're familiar with, the red, the blue with the white and the red diagonal
Union Jack.
Union Jack if it's on a boat. Technically, it's the Union flag if it's not on a boat, but generically it's called Union Jack, right? That's what people think is the English flag. Well, the English flag is actually a piece of that, which is a white background with a red cross. It's the St. George's cross, our patron saint, St. George, right? Slew the dragon. So when the World Cup is on, England competes as England, not as the UK. So I fly my England flag, the George's cross, outside my house because I'm obnoxious. So I had someone in my neighborhood come by and said, we're in America, we don't want you Swedish people flying your flag in here. Now the Swedish, to be fair, it's the same geometric shape as the Swedish flag, but theirs happens to be blue and yellow, as is red and white. But I was called Swedish. It wasn't an accent.
Like Swiss? Was Switzerland? Maybe they confused it for Switzerland, which I believe is
but that's what it was, right? Red background.
You're right.
Were your neighbors from Florida? Because we have the monopoly on stupidity. So obviously they must have moved up from Florida.
South Carolina's got you. I don't know. It's a close second.
Oh my God! What ignorance! God, that is the most ignorant thing in the world. Not from flag recognition, from just a stupid statement. Where do you think we all came from? Is from someplace else? For God's sakes. Oh well. Anyways.
So it goes.
The Rutrow.
Oh yeah.
The Rutrow is, you've got to respect, we're speaking of TripAdvisor, the true glory of TripAdvisor are the merchants who come back and basically say, wait a second, that bad review, that was not right. When they are able to properly defend it and it's legitimate, they aren't just being obnoxious and ranting at people who had legitimate issues with it. But yes, we have a gentleman who has, what is the name of it? It's the something feather.
Plume and feathers.
What was it? Plume and feather.
Of feathers.
Plume of feathers. There's a little pub in Cornwall in the UK. And he just wasn't going to take some people denigrating his establishment because it wasn't fair. So he just really, really had some great comebacks to people. And the interesting thing was, he knew, because of a small establishment, he knew exactly who these people were, and just took them apart. So someone who basically said that they came in and they were too busy, and they basically suggested we go somewhere else, rude and arrogant. He came back and basically said, no, wait a second. You decided to wait until 7:30 p.m. on a bank holiday weekend, the busiest possible time, to feed your child. Almost kind of the subtext being, why are you feeding your child so late? You bad parent. And then, so she demanded some chips or, fries, as an American would say, for their children. They said, it's going to be about 40 or 45 minutes because they're just maxed out trying to serve all the people who had reservations months in advance and things like that. But he basically, came in and said, if you're looking for rude and arrogant, maybe you should, take a closer look at yourself.
Yeah, and he went through all of her past reviews from other places and
which was brilliant.
And she called everyone rude.
That's right.
He said she maybe needed to have some self-reflection and look at herself.
So what he basically does is, he doesn't just react to it. He goes back and says, well, who is this person who's complaining, and what have they done elsewhere? And
he understands where it's coming from.
They do this a lot. I see.
So. What's great about it, though, not everyone could get away with this, right? And we did an episode of the podcast recently where we talked about this, like the best and worst review responses, and there were some great ones and some terrible ones. And what makes this one good and doesn't get into the offensive line is they don't have emotion in it. It's very tongue-in-cheek. It's very humorous in the right way. And they do it in a way that I think kind of makes the whole situation
they explain themselves as they go through the process. They just don't bash back. They explain
it's not an emotional response at all. Look, you can't they're very rational with the response, right? And that makes a big difference. And they point out the absurdity of the irrational response. Like one of them was talking about how what they gave wasn't really a review. It was just that, like, they were having a hissy fit, like the kid that didn't get the last biscuit, right? Because they didn't get to eat the food, and yet they were saying that the food was terrible, and it just broke down and ridiculed the response.
It wasn't a review. They pointed out. I mean, that's the factual aspect of it. They pointed out that it wasn't a review. It was a complaint.
Yeah.
And honestly, and this goes back to any consumer sentiment site at all, it's not a venue. If you want corrected service, if there's something that's being deficient, the best way to do it is bring it to the attention of the people that can correct it, not by publicly broadcasting post-event the thing itself. Now, if you did everything that you could as a consumer to communicate and talk and deal with and was rational, not irrational, but rational about your concerns, okay? And they treated you in such a demonstrative way, then you want to warn other guests that you can't resolve these issues with them, even if you bring them to their attention. Then I think there's legitimacy of complaint in there, as long as you detail out what it was. But just to go over and say, as you said, I didn't get food, so the food must be terrible, is kind of like that's just a whine,
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a lot of the people he was making fun of they were just being babies, right? They were complaining because they didn't get their way. They didn't get what they wanted. Like one of them was saying, one of them said, "Oh, we went there for a birthday, and the person, the waiter or waitress was giving us too many compliments," was the complaint. But the same review said, but they didn't give any special attention to the person whose birthday it was. And so he made the point. It's like, well, I chastised my waiter or waitress for being too nice and giving you guys too many compliments.
Yeah. So what you're saying, Stuart, is that in your amicable way, you said to your neighbor that mistook your flag for Norwegian was, listen, you ignorant twit. If you couldn't tell the difference between one flag versus the next, this is England, and because of that, if we didn't show up, you wouldn't even freaking be here. So why don't you figure out where this all came from and get back to your little patch of green world on the other side of the street?
Yeah, I didn't say that. I just shook my head in disdain. I'm not confrontational.
You didn't say, let me use small words less than 3 syllables as I described this to you?
Yeah. No, but yeah, it was great though. He'd count the number. Somebody used 18 exclamation points and stuff like that. Yeah. I mean, it was just very well done. That was
funny, right? Because he was so absurd with his responses and used analogies that were funny, and you just got to be careful because you can make a bad situation worse. I think in his case, it sounds like he's running a business very successfully. They're busy. They're booked a lot. A lot of the complaints were the wait time. So, I don't think he has a lot of risk in what he's doing, and the charm that he's putting into these reviews actually, to me, was endearing. Like I would want to go visit this place if I was there, just to meet the guy, right?
Right.
Well, he's not obnoxious, he's not mean-spirited, he's not emotional. So I think
the way he phrases this is that he is taking care of his local community in the sense that he's a local vendor, and the local community is patronizing him, as consumers because they enjoy whatever it is he's doing. This audacity of people coming in thinking that that they want to get certain things out of context of what he's providing as a service to his local community, and only to complain about it, but have not a real legitimate issue with what's being done is what I think is the logic of the conversation of how he put it. So I think it was good.
Yeah, really good. Just be careful if you want to try this. I would have someone proofread it first before you publish it.
And you've got to be good at this too. Yeah.
You gotta have a. What is the sign of the smartest intelligence is the ability of sarcasm and wit. You have to have a good command of what the point you're trying to make and the language you're using to make the point in a way without having to be, which is why Robert and I are never really good at sarcasm or wit. So I used 18 exclamation marks and little smiley faces. I actually got called out once. It's like, it's not very professional to put little smiley face things in your emails when you're talking about business. I'm like, you can't confuse them. I'm sorry, it's just me. I like putting little smiley faces in, like, hey, just emails.
These millennials love their emojis. What can he say?
Right. To me, it's like, look, I've been on the wrong side of email interpretation.
Not an age, right? That's what people are.
Because I've read people's emails and totally misread their intent just because I read the words and not the meaning. But it's hard to not think that at least if you put a smiley face in, that I'm not trying to be mean when I say this, but I need to make the point. Smiley face.
Right. But again, know what the emojis mean. Perhaps if you do it, that would be the similar to this TripAdvisor. So
what does that little chocolate whip one mean? I don't.
Is that a chocolate?
Emojis mean different things in different societies as well, so they don't always mean the
same. Exactly. Yeah.
Very true. Very true.
Be careful. So.
All right then. Well,
Lauren, will you stop sending me eggplant emojis though in your texts?
Come on, you know what that means.
It's a good. It's a very, it's a healthy food stuff. What's wrong with that?
He's worried about my nutrition.
He's vegan.
I'm going vegan, and I want to share my veganness with you.
Peaches and zucchinis.
All right. So with that in mind, gentlemen, thank you very much. I think we can wrap up show 186.
Please.
Mr. Robert, if people want to know more about Rock Cheetah, where maybe they find
rockcheetah.com or at Robert K. Cole.
and Mr. Stewart, who I'm now an avid. I'm actually going backwards on your podcast now because I've eaten up all the new ones. And I'm going backwards because you have such great lists on some stuff. And some of the stuff is Thomas, and some of the stuff is like, I remember we were talking about that. And yeah, man, it changed since then and stuff. I picked up a couple out of 17 recently. But anyway, so where can they find you and all things Fuel Travel?
Yeah, so if you want to send me emojis, you can do it on Twitter at Fuel Travel. Website's fueltravel.com. The podcast is fueltravel.com/podcast as well. We're doing an episode we're going to record today on what is it? Oh, we're doing the top 10 ways to find new guests. So digital marketing primarily, but ways that you can go and attract new people, not repeat guests.
Lauren was just in Las Vegas. You get one of those sandwich boards. You can go and check it out and hand people little cards.
Keep in mind, it's just a sandwich board. That's what really gets the attention.
Well,
yeah.
Anyways, for this episode,
what about you, sir? Can they find you somewhere on the web?
Probably they're not going to look after this show, but for this show and all previous 185 shows, you can go to hospitalitydigitalmarketing.com/live. There you'll find links to all the previous shows and this one included. And next week, we might have a guest host. I'm actually trying to firm up some conversations with an organization out of Europe, which should be kind of interesting. I'll share that with you guys later if it comes through.
Can we get the landlord of that pub on the show? The guy that left.
We don't want any foreigners on.
They're going to be from Norway. I heard they're based in Myrtle Beach. But anyways, to everyone that joined us and played back the recordings and so forth, and might I tell you, when you say that nobody listens to the show, we are not required. Well, actually, in one place we are required, but we are identified curriculum for the organization at UNT in Dallas.
Really?
For the hospitality program.
Wait, is this like some Clockwork Orange thing? They're like tying kids down and forcing their eyes open.
Well, there is some sort of forced eyelids, but I haven't seen any pictures to confirm or deny that. But they do buy a little eye drops.
I can't think of anything worse than forcing people to watch this show. Man.
Yeah, I can drive up there and do some sort of hostage rescue sort of thing. It's only maybe half an hour or 40 minutes. So.
UNLV gives us as a recommended point of contact for their classes, and Georgetown University also recommends us.
Wow, look at that. We're considered almost legitimate. That's great.
Well, at least it sounds good in paper, right? All right. So thank you all. We will see you all next week. Show number 187, Friday, 11:30 Eastern, 10:30 Central. Until then, bye, everybody.